October 17th, 2023, 6:38 p.m. The photo wasn't supposed to exist. Not anymore. It was tucked inside a worn brown wallet, creased, weathered, almost fossilized by time and sweat. The wallet had been lost or discarded, no one knew. But it had ended up in a donation box outside a church thrift store in Edenbrook, North Carolina. That night, it made its way into the hands of a woman named Celia Arden. She'd been browsing for used coats and Halloween costumes for her son when a volunteer handed her the wallet. "Found this in a jacket pocket," the woman said. "Thought maybe it was yours." It wasn't. But when Celia opened it, her world folded in on itself. Inside was a faded Polaroid, a tarp-covered shape, and standing next to it, grinning like it was just another day at work, was her husband, Thomas Arden. Celia didn't scream, didn't faint. She thanked the volunteer, walked to her car, and locked the doors. For 15 minutes, she stared at the photo, blinking as if her eyes would adjust to something her mind refused to accept. Thomas had told her years ago that he'd done cleanup work for a demolition company back in the late 2000s. He'd made it sound like dumpsters, asbestos, busted drywall, not bodies. That night, after putting their son to bed, Celia took the photo into the laundry room and laid it under the light. It was old, a little warped, but the tarp was clear. The shape beneath it was unmistakable, a body. And the man beside it, her husband, looked calm, like someone who'd done this before. Now, I've always believed there are two kinds of silence in this world, the kind that comes from peace, and the kind that comes right before something breaks. That night, Celia sat in the second kind. She didn't call the police. She didn't tell Thomas. Instead, she took a photo of the Polaroid with her phone. Then she tucked the original inside an envelope, sealed it, and slid it into a copy of Charlotte's Web, a book her son had outgrown, but she hadn't had the heart to donate. For 2 days, she watched her husband more closely than she ever had. His routines, his movements, his tone. And she kept asking herself the same quiet question. What else had he buried? The next break came from the most ordinary place. Thomas had left the garage open while cleaning out their old Subaru, which they were planning to sell. Celia noticed a bag sitting in the trunk. She wouldn't have touched it, shouldn't have, but something made her look. Inside was an old external hard drive, no label, just dust. She plugged it in that night while Thomas showered. There weren't many files, but one folder caught her eye. It was named only with a date, March 19th, 2009. Inside were photos, 10 of them, all taken in a wooded area, all with GPS tags. And in the background of the fourth one was the same tarp, the same shape, and the same man, smiling. Celia Arden didn't sleep that night. She just lay there in the dark, listening to her husband's breathing beside her. It was steady, familiar. But after what she'd seen on that hard drive, it sounded different, like it belonged to someone else. She woke up early before sunrise, made coffee she didn't drink, sat at the kitchen table with the Polaroid in one hand and her phone in the other. The GPS data embedded in the photo file from the hard drive had coordinates. She plugged them into a map. It was a stretch of woods west of Lattimore County, near a place called Parson's Bend. She didn't recognize it, had never been there, but the moment she zoomed in on satellite view, something made her breath hitch. The terrain was identical to the backdrop in the Polaroid. Same tree clusters, same slope, same broken fence line. It wasn't just similar, it was the place. She didn't go to the police, not yet. Instead, she went to the garage. Thomas kept an old binder of work receipts and project logs from his construction jobs over the years. She flipped through it, page by page, until she found an invoice dated March 20th, 2009, the day after the folder name. It listed a subcontracting job at a site off Parsons Bend Road. Demolition prep. Cash payment. No client name. That night, she uploaded the photo to a private Reddit forum focused on unsolved cold cases. She used an anonymous account. No names, just a question. Does anyone recognize this area? This was taken in 2009, possibly connected to a missing person. She left the screen on and sat by her son's door until he fell asleep. Then she went back and read the comments. One stood out. Looks a lot like the site where they searched for Jillian Harrow back in 2010. She was never found. Celia had never heard the name before, so she searched it. Jillian Harrow, 24th graduate student. Last seen in Lattimore County, March 19, 2009. There are moments that split you clean in half. Before and after. Known and unknown. Safe and something else. That night, Celia crossed that line. And she did it alone. The next day, she called out of work, dropped her son off at school. Then she drove. It took 2 hours to reach the location. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. When she parked off a dirt road near Parsons Bend, the first thing she noticed was how still it was. No birds, no wind, just trees and the faint hum of her own breath. She walked in 20 yards before she saw it. A clearing, not recent, but not forgotten either, and in the center, partly grown over, was a section of ground that looked different, flattened, packed, slightly discolored. She didn't touch it, didn't move closer. She just stood there, phone in hand, heart in her throat. And for the first time, she said it out loud. "What did you do, Thomas?" For the next 2 weeks, Celia Arden said nothing. She cooked dinner, did the laundry, kissed her son good night. And every morning she woke up beside a man she no longer recognized. Thomas was the same on the surface, still joked with the neighbors, still used too much sugar in his coffee. But once you saw the photo, once you found the folder, you couldn't unsee it. And Celia couldn't pretend, not anymore. The first person to notice wasn't an adult. It was their son, Ethan, 7 years old, bright. Too bright, maybe. "Mom," he asked one night while brushing his teeth, "why do you look sad even when you smile?" Celia froze. "I don't," she said too quickly, but Ethan just looked at her, quiet, like he knew better. That night, she sat in the dark, the laptop open on the kitchen table. She searched for everything she could find about Jillian Harrow. Articles, obituaries, missing posters archived on local blogs. Most of the links were dead, but one cached newspaper clipping stood out. Search scaled back in Lattimore disappearance. April 2009. It quoted a sheriff's deputy who said the terrain had been too difficult, that the area off Parsons Bend held too much brush, too many old construction sites. Without a witness or a confession, it said, there's nowhere else to look. Celia read the line 5 times. Then she whispered it to herself. Nowhere else to look. Funny how a sentence from 14 years ago can land in your chest like it was written for you, because Celia knew exactly where to look. She just didn't know who would believe her. She started checking Thomas's schedule, not obsessively, just enough. Which days he left early, which nights he worked late. She started taking notes, time stamps, driving routes. And then, one morning, she opened the family desktop, one they barely used anymore, and found something that stopped her breath cold. The recycle bin had been recently emptied, but the log still showed the file name harrowvid.mp4. No file to open, just the shadow of it. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the hallway outside her son's room, knees pulled to her chest, hands wrapped around nothing. She remembered their wedding, their first apartment, the first time Thomas held Ethan. And then she remembered the photo, the tarp, the smile. And for the first time since this began, she cried, not because she was afraid, but because some truths don't just haunt, they dismantle. The next few days, Celia moved like someone walking through water. Everything felt slow, heavy. But beneath the quiet, her thoughts ran fast and sharp. She started checking the garage when Thomas wasn't home. Not rummaging, just observing, inventorying, looking for anything that didn't fit. On a high shelf, behind a box of Christmas lights, she found an old camcorder. Dusty, outdated. It didn't even have a charger. She slipped it into her tote bag when no one was looking. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed and Thomas fell asleep on the couch, she went online and ordered a replacement charging cable. It arrived 3 days later. The camcorder powered on with a soft whir. The screen flickered, battery low, but enough. There were 3 video files. 2 were family clips, Ethan as a toddler, Thomas grilling in the backyard. The third had no label, just a timestamp. March 19th, 2009, 1842. She pressed play. The footage was short, less than 30 seconds. The image shook as someone adjusted the angle. The light was dim, early evening maybe. You could hear wind, trees creaking, then a voice, not Thomas's, male, nervous, breathy. "You sure this is gonna work?" And then another voice, "Thomas, it'll be gone by morning. Just keep your mouth shut." Then, nothing. The clip cut out, abrupt, like it had been stopped or edited. Some truths don't arrive all at once. They come in slivers, in flickers of tape, in voices you thought you knew. And once you hear them, you can't unhear them. Celia copied the video to a flash drive, labeled it something boring, tucked it inside her desk drawer beneath utility bills and expired coupons. The next morning, she came down to the kitchen and found Thomas already up. He was staring out the window, coffee in hand, back stiff. When he turned, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Couldn't sleep?" he said. She nodded. "Me neither." They didn't speak again until he left for work. That evening, Celia got a text. "Did you move something in the garage?" She stared at the screen, typed. deleted. Typed again. Just organizing, looking for the old Halloween stuff. A minute passed. Right. Nothing else. That night, she dreamed of the woods, of a voice she couldn't see, of a tarp flapping in the wind, and when she woke, her pillow was damp, not with tears, with sweat, because something was changing, and the air around Thomas was starting to crack. It was a Tuesday when Celia returned to Parson's Bend. She told Thomas she had a dentist appointment in the city, left a little earlier than needed, took the long way there, made sure no one followed. She parked at the same clearing as before, only this time she brought gloves. Not because she planned to dig, but because she didn't want to leave anything behind. The ground hadn't changed, still unnaturally flat, still too quiet. She walked the perimeter, slow, letting her boots sink into the soft places. She didn't touch the center, not yet. Instead, she circled outward 20 feet, then 30. At 32 paces just beyond a half-rotted stump, she saw it. A patch of disturbed soil, slightly sunken, the color of wet ash. She knelt, brushed away a layer of leaves. Just beneath the surface was plastic, heavy, folded in on itself, and inside, something glinted in the light. Metal. She didn't pull it out. She took a photo. Then she stood, backed away, and walked straight to her car. That night, Celia didn't sleep. Again. She sat in the laundry room with the lights off, playing the camcorder footage on loop, listening for anything she missed, a name, a second voice, something. She paused on the last frame, the one where Thomas said, "Just keep your mouth shut." Then she shut the laptop. There's a moment in every unraveling where the knot goes slack, not because it's solved, but because the lie can't hold its own weight anymore. Celia had reached that moment, and the silence around it was deafening. The next morning, she called in sick, dropped Ethan at school, then drove to a hardware store 2 towns over. She bought a burner phone. Then from the parking lot, she made an anonymous call to the Lattimore County Sheriff's tip line. She gave them the coordinates, said there was something in the ground, didn't give a name, didn't wait for questions. She hung up. That night, as she sat beside Ethan reading a bedtime story, her phone buzzed. It was Thomas. "Where'd you go today?" Celia looked at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "Took a drive." A pause. "Anywhere I know?" She didn't answer. Not yet. Because some truths weren't meant to be sent in words. They had to be unearthed. The excavation began quietly, no sirens, no reporters. Just a pair of marked vehicles, a black tarp, and the low hum of shovels scraping soil. It was the morning of November 7th, 2023. Overcast, cold, the kind of weather that made your breath fog and your bones ache. Celia sat in her car down the road from the site. She didn't get out, just watched through the windshield as officers worked. One carried a clipboard, another marked the ground with orange flags. Then came a forensic tech, crouching over something the others had cleared. It took less than an hour. By 10:15, they'd stopped digging. They'd found something. The Lattimore County Sheriff's Office issued a brief press release that afternoon. The wording was cautious. An anonymous tip led investigators to a site off Parsons Bend Road. Partial skeletal remains were recovered. Forensic analysis is underway. No names, no assumptions, but Celia already knew because she'd read the old case files, had memorized the missing person bulletin, the clothes Jillian Harrow was last seen wearing. And in the blurry photo someone leaked from the site that evening, Celia saw it. A piece of faded denim and a frayed white sneaker. Some names don't rise to the surface with noise. They come up slow, with dirt on their faces and silence in their mouths. That night, Thomas came home later than usual. His shirt was untucked, his face unreadable. He didn't mention the site, didn't ask where she'd been. Over dinner, Ethan talked about a school project. Thomas nodded, smiled when he should, but his eyes didn't match his voice. After Ethan went to bed, Celia started clearing the table. Thomas stood at the sink, rinsing plates. Then, without turning, he said, "They're saying it might be her." Celia didn't answer. That girl, from back then. Still, she said nothing. So he turned. "You think I had something to do with it?" She looked at him for a long time. Not angry, not afraid, just tired. "I don't know what I think anymore." And that, somehow, was worse than a yes, because it meant she'd stopped believing the man in front of her was the same one she married. The confirmation came 3 days later. A press conference, brief, somber. Sheriff's officials stood behind a podium and delivered the news Celia already knew. The remains found off Parsons Bend Road were positively identified as Jillian Harrow. DNA matched a sample submitted by her sister. Dental records confirmed it. The case was now officially reopened as a homicide. No suspects named. No arrests. Not yet. That evening, Celia stood at the kitchen sink while the news played in the background. Ethan was at a friend's house. Thomas was upstairs. The anchorman's voice felt distant, hollow, but the words stayed sharp. Investigators are asking anyone with information about Jillian Harrow's disappearance in March 2009 to come forward. Celia didn't move, just stared out the window at the dark yard, at the swing Ethan barely used anymore. Behind her, Thomas walked in. He stood there a moment, then said, "So it's her?" Celia nodded. "They'll come asking questions." Another nod. "You're not going to tell them anything, are you?" She turned, and for the first time, her voice didn't shake. "I won't have to." That night, she found an old voicemail saved in her phone from a number she didn't recognize. It was short, 6 seconds. "You don't know me, but I worked with your husband once. Back then, be careful." She played it twice, then deleted it. Sometimes collapse doesn't come like thunder. It comes in the way someone stops saying your name, or how a home starts sounding like an echo. The next morning, Thomas didn't go to work. He sat at the dining table in the same shirt he'd slept in, coffee cold, hands clenched. Celia handed him a folder. Inside was a printout, a copy of the project invoice from the 2009. The subcontracting job. He didn't open it. Didn't need to. "You knew then?" he asked. She didn't answer. Or did you just figure it out now? Still, silence. Thomas leaned back, let out a dry laugh. You always were smarter than me. Then he stood, walked past her, and didn't touch her shoulder, didn't say goodbye, didn't close the door, because some exits aren't slammed shut. They just stay open long enough for the truth to slip through. The arrest came on a Thursday. Thomas Arden didn't resist. No shouting, no spectacle. Just a man in a gray hoodie stepping outside as if he already knew the cuffs were waiting. The official statement was brief. Based on new forensic evidence and corroborating testimony, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Thomas Arden in connection to the 2009 disappearance and death of Jillian Harrow. No plea deal, no confession, not yet. But in the end, it didn't matter. The evidence spoke louder than he ever would. Celia watched it all unfold from the other side of the glass. The news, the headlines, the people whispering in line at the grocery store. She answered no questions, gave no interviews. Instead, she cleaned out the garage, boxed up Ethan's old toys, donated the baby clothes, threw away the Polaroid, not because she wanted to forget, but because she knew she never could. A week later, a letter arrived, no return address. Postmarked 2 towns over, inside was a key and a note in Thomas's handwriting. You'll want to look under the bench, where the slats are loose. She knew the bench, the one in their backyard. Built it together the summer after Ethan was born. That evening, after putting her son to bed, Celia stepped outside. The night air was crisp. Still, she knelt, pulled at the loose slats. There was a metal tin inside, small, rusted. Inside she found a USB drive, a photo of Jillian, smiling, and a folded receipt from a gas station dated March 18th, 2009. She didn't open the USB. Not then. She just sat there, holding it in her lap, watching the stars come out one by one. Some stories don't end with justice. They end with a woman on a porch staring into the dark, wondering how many lies can fit in the space between 2 heartbeats. In the months that followed, Celia moved out of the house on Marigold Lane, took Ethan to live with her sister in South Carolina, changed her number, started over. Thomas never wrote again, never asked about Ethan, never tried to explain. And maybe that was the clearest truth of all. I once heard someone say that the worst ghosts aren't the ones who knock or moan. They're the ones who leave quietly and take the warm parts of you with them. Jillian Harrow never came home, but her name was finally spoken. And sometimes that's all we're left with, a name and the firelight. Well, if you stayed with me all the way through, I sure appreciate the company. Go on and tap that like and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this, told slow and easy, right here by the firelight. Take good care now.